But let's back up, because to understand why anyone listened to such a radical idea, you need to understand just how badly the Allies were losing in 1941. The Atlantic Ocean had become a graveyard. German U-boats prowled beneath the surface in coordinated wolf packs, hunting Allied convoys with devastating efficiency. A single torpedo could send 10,000 tons of cargo, food, fuel, ammunition, vehicles to the bottom in minutes. The mathematics were brutal and simple. U-boats were sinking ships faster than shipyards could build them. In 1941 alone, German submarines and surface raiders sent approximately 3.6 million tons of Allied shipping to the ocean floor. That's roughly 430 cargo vessels gone, each one taking desperately needed supplies with it. Britain, fighting alone against Nazi-occupied Europe, was slowly starving. Cargo ships carried everything the island nation needed to survive. Wheat from Canada, oil from Texas, steel from Pennsylvania, ammunition from factories across America. Without those ships, Britain's war effort and its civilian population would collapse within months. American and British admirals understood the crisis. Their solution: build better ships, stronger hulls, more defensive armament, vessels that could survive torpedo strikes and keep sailing. Shipbuilders had a different answer: give us more time. Traditional maritime construction moved at the pace of craftsmanship. Skilled riveters worked in teams, heating and hammering 1 million metal pins through overlapping steel plates. Master welders reinforced critical joints. Experienced foremen coordinated hundreds of specialized tasks in careful sequence. Keel to launch: 6 to 8 months, sometimes longer. Using those timelines, American shipyards were producing cargo vessels at an average rate of 230 days per ship. Do the math. At 230 days per ship, a single shipyard might complete 5 or 6 vessels per year. America had dozens of shipyards, but many were building warships, destroyers, cruisers, aircraft carriers that took even longer. The equation was unsustainable. U-boats were sinking ships in minutes. Shipyards were building replacements in months. The gap between destruction and production was widening every week, and the consequences weren't theoretical, they were immediate and visible. Before we continue, click that subscribe button, like this video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It brings me great joy knowing that these war stories and lessons get to people all over the world. Your support helps us bring more thrilling war stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now let's get back to the story. British food rations dropped to starvation levels. Civilian fuel allocations were cut repeatedly. Factories producing tanks and aircraft slowed production because steel shipments never arrived. Military operations were canceled because ammunition sat on American docks with no ships to carry it across the Atlantic. Vice Admiral Emory S. Land, chairman of the United States Maritime Commission, watched the reports come in with growing alarm. His agency was responsible for America's merchant fleet, the cargo vessels that would either save Britain or watch it fall. In private correspondence, Land admitted the reality: "We are losing the Battle of the Atlantic on the production line, not the firing line." Admirals kept demanding better ships. Shipbuilders kept demanding more time, more skilled workers, more resources. But time was the one thing the Allies didn't have. Britain's strategic reserves were measured in weeks, not months. Every convoy that failed to arrive pushed the nation closer to collapse. Every ship sunk represented food that wouldn't feed families, fuel that wouldn't power factories, ammunition that wouldn't reach soldiers. The traditional shipbuilding establishment, proud, skilled, refined across generations, had no answer for this crisis. Their methods worked. Their craftsmanship was unmatched. Their expertise was genuine. But expertise doesn't matter when reality moves faster than tradition can respond. By late 1940, the situation had become desperate enough that Washington was willing to listen to ideas it would have dismissed as insane just months earlier. That's when Henry Kaiser walked into the room with a proposal that sounded less like naval architecture and more like the survival logic of a prison camp. Abandon perfection, embrace speed, build ships like they're disposable to fall. Henry Kaiser's proposal landed on desks across Washington like a grenade. Strip away everything, he said. Forget elegance, forget craftsmanship, forget the centuries of maritime tradition that treated ships like works of art. Build them like ammunition, fast, crude, good enough to cross the Atlantic once, maybe twice before they fell apart. It didn't matter if they were beautiful. It didn't matter if they followed tradition. What mattered was getting them into the water before U-boats made them irrelevant. The maritime establishment reacted exactly as you'd expect, with horror. Kaiser wasn't proposing an improvement to shipbuilding. He was proposing its abandonment. First heresy: eliminate riveting entirely. For generations, riveting had been the backbone of ship construction. Skilled crews heated metal pins to glowing orange, positioned them through overlapping steel plates, and hammered them flat while still hot. The work required coordination, strength, timing, experience. A good riveting crew could install maybe 100 rivets per day. Each Liberty ship needed approximately 1 million rivets if built conventionally. Kaiser proposed replacing all of it with electric arc welding, a technique maritime. Authorities considered unproven and dangerous for hull construction. Welding was fine for pipelines and dam infrastructure. But ships? Ships flexed and twisted in ocean swells. Welded joints might crack, hulls might split, vessels might literally break apart mid-ocean. The British Navy forbade welding on warship hulls. The US Navy was barely more tolerant, and Kaiser, who had never built a ship, wanted to bet America's supply lines on it. Second heresy, prefabrication. Traditional shipbuilding followed a sacred sequence: lay the keel, build the hull frame, install bulkheads, add decks, install machinery, complete superstructure. Each step waited for the previous step to finish. Kaiser proposed building everything simultaneously. Fabricate the bow in one area while other crews built the stern, engine room, deckhouse, and bulkheads in parallel, like stamping out automobile parts. Then use massive cranes to assemble pre-built sections like children's blocks. John Riley, chief naval architect at Bethlehem Steel and a 30-year veteran, summarized the industry's reaction in his inspection report. "This is not shipbuilding. This is industrial assembly masquerading as maritime construction." He meant it as condemnation. Kaiser took it as confirmation he was on the right track. Third heresy, replace the workforce. Traditional shipyards recruited from maritime communities where skills passed from father to son. Apprenticeships lasted 4 years. Craftsmanship was guarded, specialized, earned through decades of experience. Kaiser proposed hiring anyone willing to work, then teaching them one specific task in 2 weeks, not comprehensive maritime skills, not craftsmanship, just repetition. Weld this vertical seam over and over until muscle memory replaced expertise. Secretaries could do it, farmers could do it, housewives could do it. The idea was insulting. It reduced shipbuilding, a proud profession refined across centuries, to factory labor any amateur could perform. William Francis Gibbs, America's most respected naval architect, put it bluntly in correspondence with the Maritime Commission. Kaiser proposes to build ships the way Ford builds automobiles. Ships are not automobiles. The ocean does not forgive shortcuts. Every established authority said the same thing. It won't work. The ships would be too weak, the welds would fail, the untrained workers would produce garbage, the whole scheme would collapse under its own naivety, wasting time and resources the Allies didn't have. Kaiser's response was maddeningly simple. Let's find out. Because while experts were explaining why it was impossible, German U-boats were sinking ships faster than tradition could replace them. And in war, comfortable expertise loses to uncomfortable results every single time. The question wasn't whether Kaiser's idea violated every principle of proper shipbuilding. The question was whether it would work before Britain starved. Kaiser didn't wait for permission to prove he was right. He just started building. The Richmond shipyard rose from California mudflats in less than a year, and it looked nothing like a traditional maritime facility. No massive gantry cranes spanning single building ways, no longitudinal construction paths where ships grew slowly from keel to completion. Instead, 7 parallel building ways surrounded by open fabrication areas, railroad tracks crisscrossing the yard, overhead cranes every 100 feet capable of lifting 150-ton sections. It looked like an automobile factory because that's exactly what Kaiser had copied. And then the workers arrived. August 1941, the first groups showed up in Richmond. Former store clerks, farm laborers, housewives, mechanics, people who had never seen a ship under construction. Traditional shipyards would have sent them through 4-year apprenticeships. Kaiser's instructors gave them 2 weeks. Here's your station, here's your tool, here's the one weld you're going to make hundreds of times until you can do it in your sleep. Vertical seams on bulkheads, horizontal plates on decks, curved joints on hull sections. That's it. Not comprehensive maritime knowledge, just muscle memory and repetition. The simplification went deeper than training. Kaiser's engineers took the Liberty ship blueprints, complex drawings that showed every rivet, every joint, every measurement, and rewrote them for mass production. They eliminated variations, standardized components, reduced custom fabrication. Anywhere a part could be made identical across multiple ships, they made it identical. Prefabrication areas became miniature factories. One crew did nothing but build bow sections, the same bow over and over, learning every shortcut and efficiency through repetition. Another crew specialized in stern assemblies, another in deckhouses. While those sections were being built in parallel, other crews prepared the building ways, laid keels, and stood ready for final assembly. Then the cranes moved. Entire bow sections, pre-welded, pre-fitted, complete, lifted into position. Stern sections dropped into place. Engine rooms built around their engines and fabrication areas lowered into hulls as single units. What traditionally took months of sequential construction now took days of parallel assembly. And the numbers started proving it. Kaiser's first Liberty ship 197 days from keel to launch. Not impressive. Traditional yards were doing similar times, but then something shifted. Ship number 2, 169 days. Ship number 5, 128 days. Ship number 10, 97 days. The learning curve wasn't gradual, it was exponential. Workers who had never welded before became faster through sheer repetition. Foremen identified bottlenecks and eliminated them. Crane operators learned to position sections with millimeter precision. Prefabrication crews cut wasted motion from every task. By spring 1942, barely 6 months after the first workers arrived, Richmond was averaging 70 days per ship. Traditional shipyards watched with growing alarm. Their highly skilled, experienced crews were being matched by amateurs who'd learned to weld in 2 weeks. The maritime establishment's explanations grew desperate. Kaiser's ships are inferior. The welds will fail. They're sacrificing quality for speed. Wait until they hit rough seas. They'll break apart, except they didn't. Liberty ships crossed the Atlantic, survived torpedo strikes, weathered storms, delivered cargo, and came back for more. The crude, fast, good-enough vessels built by untrained workers were performing, and Kaiser wasn't done accelerating. Engineers identified every task that could be simplified further, every component that could be pre-assembled, every second that could be eliminated from the construction process. The Richmond yards began competing against each other, different shifts, different building ways, racing to see who could finish faster. By fall 1942, construction times had dropped below 50 days on average. Then someone asked the obvious question, how fast could we build one if we tried? The answer would shatter every remaining assumption about what was physically possible. And it would be measured not in months or weeks, but in hours. November 8, 1942, Kaiser's Richmond Yard. Number 2 made an announcement that sounded like a publicity stunt. They would attempt to build a complete Liberty ship in less than a week, not just assemble a partially completed hull, not just finish work started weeks earlier, build an entire cargo vessel, 441 feet long, 14,245 tons, from bare keel to ready for launch in under 7 days. Maritime experts called it a circus. A propaganda exercise. Impossible. The U.S. Maritime Commission, skeptical but curious, sent official observers. So did competing shipyards. Todd, Bethlehem Steel, Newport News, their representatives arriving with barely concealed smugness. Traditional shipbuilders wanted to watch Kaiser fail publicly. What they witnessed instead was industrial warfare distilled to its purest form. The clock started at 12:01 a.m. on November 8th. Prefabrication areas across the Richmond facility had been preparing for weeks. Bow sections, stern assemblies, bulkheads, deck plates, engine room components, all built and staged, waiting for final assembly. The moment the keel touched the building way, the yard erupted into coordinated chaos. Cranes moved constantly. Railroad cars delivered massive steel sections on precise schedules. Welding crews worked in rotating shifts. When one team finished their section, another immediately took their place. No downtime, no waiting. Albert Wooding, the production supervisor, orchestrated it like a military operation. Every task timed, every crew briefed, every component tracked to the minute. By the end of day 1, keel laid, hull frames erected, bottom plates welded. Day 2, bow and stern sections lifted into position, main deck installed. Day 3, bulkheads fitted, engine room assembly lowered into the hull as a single 150-ton unit. The observers from traditional shipyards stopped smirking. Day 4, superstructure completed, piping and electrical systems installed, final welding begun. John Riley from Bethlehem Steel, who had dismissed Kaiser's methods as industrial assembly masquerading as maritime construction, watched the 4th day's progress in silence. His inspection notes, preserved in company archives, captured the shift. What I am witnessing should not be possible, yet the vessel taking shape before me appears structurally sound. These workers, most with less than a year's experience, are executing tasks at speeds our master craftsmen cannot match. Day 5, early morning. Final systems tested, hull painted, launching preparations begun. By 4:15 p.m. on November 12th, 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes after the keel was laid, the SS Robert E. Peary slid into San Francisco Bay, complete, functional, ready for war. The crowd stood silent for a long moment. Then the workers erupted in celebration. The maritime authorities present didn't celebrate. They just stared. William Francis Gibbs, America's most respected naval architect, the man who had designed more ships than Kaiser had probably seen, walked the completed vessel with his inspection team. His official report to the Maritime Commission contained no criticism, no condescension, just cold acknowledgement. The vessel meets all structural and safety requirements. Construction methodology, while unorthodox, has proven effective. Previous objections regarding welded hull construction appear unfounded. Translation. We were wrong. He was right. Within weeks, the Maritime Commission made Kaiser's methods official policy. Traditional shipyards were ordered to adopt prefabrication, welding, and simplified training programs. Resistance was no longer tolerated. The war wouldn't wait for pride. Todd Bath Iron Works, the established yard that had partnered with Kaiser, assuming their expertise would compensate for his ignorance, quietly began copying his techniques. So did Bethlehem Steel and Newport News, and every other yard that wanted to stay relevant. The Robert E. Peary speed record wasn't just a publicity stunt, it was a public execution of traditional maritime authority. Centuries of craftsmanship, refinement, and expertise had been rendered obsolete by a construction magnate who treated ships like disposable tools, and the most humiliating part? It worked better. Here's what happened next. By 1943, Kaiser's methods had spread across every major American shipyard. Richmond, Portland, Vancouver, Baltimore, 18 shipyards operating at full capacity, all using the same brutal logic. Speed beats perfection. The production numbers became almost absurd. In 1941, American shipyards delivered roughly 1 Liberty ship per week. By 1943, they were launching 3 Liberty ships per day. Think about that. 70 ships per month, 840 ships per year. Vessels appearing faster than U-boats could sink them. The mathematics of the Atlantic reversed. German submarine commanders, who had spent 1941 and 1942 hunting convoys with near impunity, now faced an impossible equation. For every ship they torpedoed, America launched 3 more. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's U-boat fleet, watched his strategy collapse in real time. His war diary entries from late 1943 captured the frustration. We are no longer sinking ships faster than the enemy can build them. The industrial advantage is insurmountable. The Wolfpacks withdrew. By mid-1944, the Battle of the Atlantic was effectively over, not because of naval superiority, but because American shipyards buried the threat under sheer volume. The Allies built 2,710 Liberty ships between 1941 and 1945. Crude vessels welded by amateurs built in weeks instead of months. They carried 75% of all cargo shipped to Allied forces during the war. But the transformation went deeper than numbers. Walk into Kaiser's Richmond shipyard in 1943 and you'd see something that would have been unthinkable 3 years earlier. Women welding hull sections, African Americans operating cranes, Mexican Americans supervising construction crews. Rosie the Riveter became a cultural icon, but the real revolution was in the welding bays. By 1944, women made up 27% of the shipyard workforce across America, not in administrative roles on the building ways doing the physical work that tradition had reserved for men. The democratization wasn't ideological, it was practical. Kaiser needed bodies, and the traditional maritime guilds didn't have enough skilled workers, so he trained everyone who showed up, and the social barriers that had kept women and minorities out of skilled trades simply collapsed under necessity. The post-war world inherited that logic. When Henry Ford II visited Kaiser's Richmond yard in 1943, he saw the future of manufacturing. Prefabrication, parallel assembly, task simplification. Workers trained in weeks, not years. He took it back to Detroit, so did Boeing, Lockheed, General Electric. The methods that built Liberty ships became the template for post-war mass production across every industry. Japan, rebuilding its shattered industrial base after 1945, studied American wartime manufacturing and refined it further. Toyota's production system, just-in-time delivery, continuous improvement, elimination of waste, descended directly from the survival logic Kaiser proved in Richmond. Global shipbuilding never recovered its old traditions. Korean shipyards in the 1970s built supertankers using Kaiser's prefabrication methods. Chinese shipyards in the 2000s became dominant by applying the same principles at even larger scales. The idea that once sounded insane, build ships like ammunition, abandon perfection, prioritize speed, became the foundation of modern industrial production. Here's the uncomfortable truth that the Liberty ship revolution exposed. Tradition isn't wisdom, it's inertia. The maritime establishment spent centuries refining their craft, and their expertise was genuine. But when reality changed faster than tradition could adapt, all that knowledge became irrelevant. Kaiser didn't win because he was smarter than the experts. He won because he was willing to be wrong faster. He built crude ships that shouldn't have worked, and when they did work, he built them faster. When experts said it was impossible, he built one in 5 days just to prove the point. The prisoner of war logic that sounded so reckless in 1940, survival beats elegance, turned out to be the most practical strategy anyone proposed. By 1945, the war was over. The Liberty ships, built to last maybe a few voyages, kept sailing for decades. Some are still afloat today, and the lesson they carried was simpler than any admiral wanted to admit. Speed, when multiplied, defeats everything else.